There's a saying that you often hear from people who are in recovery 12-step groups. Would you rather be right or be happy? Would you rather be right or be happy? The point being that sometimes a need to be right can grip us in such a way that we just get angry with people who disagree with us and feel like the world is unmanageable and all this kind of stuff. I'm always a little wary about the word happiness, though, because sometimes happiness, making sure someone's happy, can mean just doing whatever we want and whatever feels right and no ramifications at all. And that's not necessarily true for Christians. That's why last week we talked about the church having one of the characteristics of the church is being prophetic. It's actually one of the roles of the church to stand up for what's right, what is God's ways, what the kingdom of God is supposed to look like, and to call us more and more to live into the fullness of that kingdom of God. That prophetic voice in the church often piques us, annoys us, frustrates us, because it calls us to what's right in the ways of God. Not us being right, but right in terms of justice and all of that. Today I want to look at the church in a little different way and our role in our life together. Paul, again, you remember, Paul is writing to the Christians, the followers of Jesus in Rome. They're sort of decided that it's okay to be two different groups, the Gentile followers and the Jewish followers, and Paul will have none of that, which is why the first week we talked about the church being Catholic. Last week we talked about the church being prophetic. So this week he says, look, you can't just say just because someone gets it wrong, you write them off. The Jewish people who aren't following Jesus, that's it for them. They're wrong. I'm right. I have no need of them. He explains that that's not how it works, that one of the other pieces of God's ways is mercy. In fact, that's one of the most basic, even more basic than that word of being right, is being merciful. All through the Hebrew Scriptures, we hear that God is a merciful God, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and words like that. And so Paul uses that word here to say that God's mercy shown to some enables that mercy to be extended to all, and that therefore they're bound, those Jewish and Gentile followers of Jesus are bound together even across their vast differences because God has shown mercy to all of them, and they should do likewise. So the word there, where we use the English word mercy, means mercy or sympathy or compassion, or a word that I like, empathy. So I want to talk today about the church being empathetic. So we had Catholic 2 weeks ago, prophetic last week. This week we're talking about the church being empathetic. The fact that we are actually called to hurt when someone else is hurting, to suffer when someone else is suffering, to enter into that, even if we can't alleviate it, to feel with those who are hurting. And this is an important piece, important foundational piece of how we understand what's right and why that wonderful phrase from recovery groups is so important. Would you rather be right or be happy? Because there's no sense of right in the kingdom of God apart from God's mercy. There's no sense of right or justice apart from God's mercy. So that prophetic voice, that voice calling us to follow the ways of the kingdom of God, is always looking first and foremost to those who are suffering the most, to those who are oppressed the most, and what it looks like for them to be liberated and made whole. That prophetic voice is always looking at that way of mercy and empathy first. And so the kingdom of God, in a way, privileges the least powerful, most vulnerable, phrase I use a lot, the least powerful, most vulnerable among us are the ones we look to first, to look for the way of the kingdom of God. What can we do? What are we called to do to empathize with, to show mercy to those who are the furthest outcast, if you will? It's why Father Burrow, last week I got the phrase wrong that I was taught when I was learning about human sexuality and how we all needed to be pure and all this silliness that I learned as a kid. The phrase, I got it backward last week. It's love the sinner, hate the sin.
That's right.
Right? I said it backward last week, so I needed to correct it. But it relates to this, doesn't it? Did you hear that growing up, that garbage?
Yes, I heard it, and it was challenging for me because it didn't ring true.
Because it doesn't ring true.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't because of this notion of needing to be right. What that phrase does, that love the sinner, hate the sin means, it's as important for me to be right. I'm right about the sin. I know you're wrong,
Right.
but I love you anyway,
Right.
which you can't. It doesn't lead to love. It doesn't lead to mercy. It doesn't lead to compassion. It doesn't lead to building a deep relationship one with another, which is what God calls us to do. So I will tell you, for me, I suspect you two would feel the same way. I will tell you, for me, in the last 6 months with this pandemic, when so much is not working in the world, when there is so much suffering and hardship, empathy is fatiguing. It's tiring. Is it tiring for you? Yeah, it's tiring. There's so much hardship and suffering, even in our own parish. We know people. We have beloved parishioners who are struggling with this pandemic financially, struggling with it with their health, who've contracted this terrible virus, and we look at this all day, every day, and it's just a lot. I imagine it's a lot for you too. This sense of empathy, though, is the source of life. And if it's feeling tiring, we need to remember that God doesn't fatigue in showing mercy to us and caring for us. That's got to be the basis of our caring for others. Because if we just try to do it ourselves, if we just think the weight of the world is on our shoulders alone to fix everything, it isn't going to work. That's why this notion of empathy has to be endemic in the church. We can't just say, well, thank goodness Burl is so caring. Since he is, I don't have to be. It doesn't work that way. We can't carry that burden alone of our own suffering when we're suffering, or the burden of caring for those others when they are as well. And by the way, what a radical image Jesus has in the gospel of mercy too, right? This woman comes up to him today and says, Jesus, Son of David, Lord, have mercy on me. And he says, I frankly think he says this to be provocative, not because he's not going to help the woman. I think he says it, he doesn't say it for her, he says it for all those other people who are thinking they're right, she's wrong, I have no need to care for her. So he sort of starts by sounding like he's affirming it. Oh no, I came for the people of Israel, not you. And there's this whole conversation, and of course in the end, what does he do? He does what's right in the kingdom of God, which is showing her mercy. I think he was going to do it all along. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? Does that make sense to you, Margaret? I think he was going to do it all along.
This is an interesting passage, Father James.
It is.
But her reaction is also really important. But yes, he shows empathy and mercy to someone who's outside of the scope of what everybody else thinks is outside the scope.
Yep. Exactly not like everyone would have expected him to do.
Right.
They would expect him to say, you're not part of us, deal with it yourself. So, friends, here's the thing about empathy and caring. We need to care. We're called to care. And we can, by God's grace, care and show empathy even when we're angry with someone. We can care and show empathy even when we don't agree with someone's politics. We can care and show empathy even when we don't share someone's life choices or agree with them. We can care and show empathy even when we think someone doesn't care about us. That's how the kingdom of God works. That's how the church works. This notion of mercy, empathy, sympathy, compassion is at the basis of our life together. It's what grounds that prophetic voice, remember. Not being right, but being just. That's where it lies. And we can't hear that prophetic voice if we're not cultivating that sense of empathy, that empathetic part of our life together. So, I know St. Paul wouldn't necessarily use the same words about the church and all of that, but I'm confident that Paul would remind us where he's here today that it's basic to our life together, basic to our life of faith, to be part of a church that is empathetic.